Hi, everybody. This is Jim Prusak from the Pain PT, and I have here today on the line Rebecca, who I really wanted to bring her on. I'm really excited to have her here. I really wanted her to share her story. She's been through a lot and has come out the other end, and I really think you might find value in her, what has helped her and her approach and her recovery story. So, Rebecca, thanks for coming on today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim. I love spreading the word about this because it's truly changed my life in a dramatic way.
Absolutely. Maybe just share a bit of your story about when you started and how what started for you, and then we'll kind of get into what's kind of helped you along the way.
Yeah. Well, in a nutshell, I had a really traumatic incident happened in my life, and I became really physically ill after that. And there was all these unexplained symptoms, really extreme exhaustion to the point where I couldn't work, I couldn't leave the house very much, insomnia, all kinds of body pain, joint pain, difficulty even remembering names, digestive issues. And eventually it was diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome. And I went down a path for about 10 years that was looking at all kinds of different therapies and treatments from allopathic to all kinds of healers and integrative and alternative medicine. And along the way, I was starting to practice gentle yoga and meditating. And those things really helped bring some sense of peace, but the symptoms really persisted for well over a decade, and they were pretty intense. Um, and then I had read Dr. John Sarno's books a few years before, and they really resonated. This whole idea that when you have these unexplained symptoms and pain, there's a cause in the brain and in the way the neural pathways are working to kind of protect you from feeling repressed emotions rather than feeling those because they may be too overwhelming. But I didn't really have support and I didn't know how it could apply to me because he initially wrote more about back pain.
Right.
And it was meeting somebody really with a similar story to me who was diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome and had a recovery through this work that really just clicked and a light bulb went off for me when I heard her story.
Yeah, I remember that when you shared that with me at the time, right? You were kind of struggling with your symptoms, and then you had spoken to her, and you had sort of one of those big, like you said, aha moments where you literally had a shift, right? A big shift in your symptoms, but then it kind of didn't completely go away, right?
Yeah, exactly. So there was this aha moment, and I think that often we just hear about that with someone else, and we assume that's the end of the story. But the work continued. But what happened with her is she basically told me, "You're not sick." And somehow I just got it that I wasn't physically ill. The symptoms were very, very real. And I think the diagnosis matched the symptoms, but the cause wasn't all kinds of things that showed up in lab work, which will show up if you test enough things. It wasn't viruses, it wasn't bacteria. It was really these repressed emotions from a very stressful time in my life that were continuing to fire in a way as if this was an active trauma and sort of shutting down my systems. And the way I look at it, looking back now, is trying to keep me in the house because there had been a pretty dangerous event or
Right.
what my brain perceived as dangerous. So when I realized this is actually my brain creating these symptoms, it's not some sort of disease that I can't overcome, like I had been told by doctors. It just clicked, and I had this really spontaneous recovery. I went from being pretty homebound with these very intense flu-like symptoms to just running around the block, and I felt like I had
Yes.
all this energy. And I became really active from that point forward. But then what started happening and why I reached out to you was kind of, those old brain patterns started kicking back in.
Yeah.
And it took working with you over a number of months to really realize those gains and sort of stabilize them and retrain my whole mind body system that I'm okay, I'm safe, I'm healthy. And the presence of these symptoms is really nothing to fear, but instead to to learn to interact with them in a sensate way as
Absolutely.
sensations.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. And so what were like the biggest things for you that kind of helped you? And what was your daily practice like, just so that people get an idea of like what
Mhm.
you put into this and how you approached it on a daily basis?
Yeah. Well, I think what was really important for me was reminding myself on a daily basis that I am okay and I am safe. And for me, for some reason, the words I am not sick really resonated, but it would be different for everybody. I couldn't jump to I am healthy. That just wasn't something my brain could
Yeah,
believe. Um, so really repeating those mantras to myself and then beginning to expand my range of activities. So, I mean, I really wasn't doing much in terms of a physical workout or work or interacting in the world because these intense symptoms would come on. So, as you helped work with me and teach me, I would start moving out of this bubble just a little bit. So, I would go do something more physical or something more social that would bring some symptoms. Sometimes it would actually bring insomnia when I would go out in the evening. That was
oh,
a big trigger, but I
mhm.
would go anyway and be somewhat indifferent to the symptoms instead of revolving my whole life around trying to avoid symptoms. It was really learning to follow what I wanted to do because there was a sense of spontaneous interest, curiosity, and letting the symptoms come. And when they come, both again kind of affirm I'm okay and I'm safe, and then the daily practice also really involved feeling into those sensations in the body. So sitting practice when I'm just feeling the sensations and kind of tracking them through the body. Um, in the morning, sometimes just whenever they would come up or the next available opportunity I would have.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that sounds great. So you kind of imbibe this approach of feeling, getting in touch with your feeling sense. It sounds like in feeling what was there, and also using sort of that positive self-talk, reframing negative thoughts into positive ones, and then also outcome independence. We would call that, right? Getting out and doing things.
Yes.
Even if you had symptoms, you would just kind of work through it while you use the tools. And then how long did, just so people understand, how long were you working at this for before you felt like you were making some sort of steadier gains and feeling a bit better overall?
Yeah. Well, let's see. That breakthrough when I kind of had the light bulb moment was quick, and I felt really great for a few days. But then probably within a week, I started getting the old symptoms back, and I think then it was over the course of about 3 months once I started working with you that I really started seeing some shifts. I started going out in the evening and I might have some sleep disturbance, but then I'd sleep through half the night. And then the next time I might sleep through most of the night. And I think over 3 months, I started seeing differences, but it really took probably 9 to 12 months to
Yeah.
really feel more stable. Um, and start, one of the things that was a big trigger for me was traveling on an airplane and especially traveling abroad because something that had happened to me that was really stressful happened when I had been abroad. So I would just start with, I think at about the 5 or 6 month mark, flying across the country. And you really helped to kind of prepare me for that. It seemed like a really scary thing because my unconscious mind was saying, this is dangerous. And so with my conscious mind, I had to sort of override that and say, no, it's safe. I know this is going to be okay, and just kind of live through some of the symptoms. Then I think by the eighth or ninth month, I took a trip abroad. And I've taken a number of trips since then. And every
Fantastic.
time, I just get stronger. There still can be some symptoms that flare up when there's what we would call a conditioned response or some kind of
Yeah.
trigger, but they're much more minor. I know how to respond. And so now I'm almost 2 years out. And it's just such an empowering way to live because it's really like you're becoming your own therapist or your own physician. And it doesn't necessarily then have to become something that, you're doing for hours every day, but you're just incorporating in your daily life and your outlook.
Absolutely. Yeah, it becomes a part of who you are now, it sounds like.
Yeah.
And one of the things I remember was great about you when you took on this approach was that you just weren't really deterred by the symptoms, right? Or even a lack of sleep. Sometimes you'd say, "Oh, I only got like 3 hours of sleep." You flew somewhere. I
Yeah.
remember that you went to like a retreat or something, and you said, "Hey, I still just went through the day and did the best I could." And that sort of mindset goes such a long way, doesn't it? Because sometimes we're going to have difficult days. We're going to have, elevated symptoms and feelings, and it's like how we deal with them is so important, isn't it?
It really is. Because in the past, when I would go out of my comfort zone and have that insomnia, I would take it as, oh, this is really, really bad. I've got to avoid that behavior in the future. That's probably hurting my health. It was actually flipping that 180 degrees. It's not that you're not caring for yourself. You are caring for yourself, but you're expanding your possibility for what you can do. And so you may have to put up with some symptoms. Like I went on that retreat and I was getting just a few hours of sleep, but I was having such a great time. And I just kept turning my attention back to that. And I think that's part of it, is turning your attention back to not just being healthy, but what's your reason for being? Why do you want to live? What lights you up? What are you curious about? And allow yourself to follow it, even if it does bring some symptoms, because after a while they really subside, and you're sort of lost in the enjoyment or the engagement of the activity.
Absolutely. And just let people know how long you were dealing with these symptoms before you kind of found this work. Like how long you really were going through this before you made the turnaround.
It was about 12, 13 years. It was a long, long stretch. There was 10 years where I was really disabled. I mean, I could take care of myself, but I couldn't work outside of the house. Um, and I had been a very active TV news reporter and someone that traveled around the world. So it was a dramatic switch in my health. But I would say even after those 10 years, it took, there was a couple years I was meditating a lot and doing things to calm the nervous system. And so I was a little more active, but still really was very limited. I wouldn't travel. I didn't work as much as I wanted to. It was really this breakthrough with the TMS and the Sarna work at really about the 12th year that I discovered it. I had that eureka moment and then kind of worked with it over the course of another year and then became stable. So really, when you have a long-term pattern, and even something that many doctors, even naturopathic doctors, said, you will always live with this. There's no known cause, there's no cure. And that can really seep into your psyche, and you believe it when it's from this authority. But I now see, although they were well intended, that really hampered my progress. And once I was able to sort of shift into this other frame of mind and this other possibility, then it was about a year. Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And it shows like, okay, a couple years really, you said of 2 years, here you are now, and you're doing so much better. But to unwind that, you had 12 years of a certain pattern being built up in your mind, like you said, being fed messages from professionals. And so just so the listeners know, it does take time to unwind these nervous system patterns, doesn't it? It's not like an overnight thing where people sometimes expect a miracle and they're done, but that's usually not the case, right?
That's exactly it. And I think we're just trained it's supposed to be fast because we live in this culture that gives us a pill to numb things out or, has a certain treatment. And of course, those all have a place. I'm not in any way opposed to those. And sometimes those things kind of really help me get through a hard time. But it's not so much a quick fix as learning to rewire your mind through the way you think and the way you feel. And then what I have found is that brings so much more energy, vitality, intuition, really, because when we're out of those thought loops and out of that fear and our nervous system is regulated, it's incredible what intuition is available. And
Yeah.
even sometimes messages come from physical sensations or symptoms. For instance, now I notice if anger comes up, which in the past I would repress, I realize it's a normal human emotion. I know how to kind of feel it in my own system. And it might have a message that you need to set a boundary. Sometimes anger is about learning to set a boundary. So it's a whole new way of living that is just so fulfilling. I'm
Yeah.
for everybody.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And it's really, what I love about this work is it changes people's lives, I found. I mean, certainly for me, going through the work I've done with this, it changed my life completely and continues to this day, continues to evolve. And so it's like an unfolding process that just keeps going, but in a great way.
Yeah, it was helpful. Sometimes you would share some little things you were going through with running or whatever, that it would still come up from time to time, but you just kept working through it and then it passes.
Yeah. I mean, that's being human, right?
Yeah.
Talking to other people in the field, Dr. Schubiner and other people say the same thing. Hey, I'm human. I still get TMS symptoms. It doesn't mean that, again, we're cured forever because this is a human condition and how our nervous system works, right? And we have these patterns and memories that are still in there. Even if they're fading out, there's still a little memory in our brains that can trigger stuff in our bodies. So just to finish up, anything else you want to share that was really helpful, or pointers that you want to share with people to help them on their own journeys?
Yeah. Well, something that's so helpful to me now is whenever physical symptoms come up, I ask, what am I feeling emotionally? So, really feeling into the physical symptoms. But when I ask that question and I just take some moments to feel into my body, there's often emotion that was coming up that was kind of repressed. And so then the brain's creating a physical symptom to distract me. And you start living in this very dynamic way. So I think, what am I feeling emotionally, or what's happening in my life emotionally when there's physical symptoms? It doesn't really matter 100% if you think it's TMS. I find just even asking that question, bringing in your emotional self, is really important. And I think the other thing that's so important to me, and I touched upon this, but for others as well, is just to really not let anybody convince you you're broken, and that you're never going to heal. And shifting the focus from just how am I going to get physically well to what brings a little bit of mental relief, what brings a little bit of emotional relief, what brings a little bit of enjoyment. These things can take a lot of stress off the nervous system and that danger signal in the brain, and just start calming it down just by turning to some simple activities you enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are great tips. So before we leave, what are you up to now? What are you doing now in the world since you've kind of went through this journey and now you're really excited to kind of begin a new chapter?
Yeah, because this has made such a pivotal role in my life and a pivotal shift, I'm coaching people myself now. So I'm a life coach and also a mind body coach. So I work with people on these types of issues, as well as other issues that come up in their life around work or relationships, but sort of learning to feel and process them through the body, and through that realm of sensation, which is
Great.
very foreign to a lot of people, but very rich.
Very, very foreign. I mean, that's the nature of TMS, isn't it? That we're
Yeah.
repressing, suppressing feelings. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Rebecca, sharing your story, giving some great insight for people, because people can listen to your story, and that really gives people inspiration and hope and little nuggets to kind of help themselves on their own healing journey. So thank you again very much for coming on.
Thank you, Jim. You've made such a big difference in my life, and I'm so grateful for the work you do.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Thank you
Great.
again. Okay. Bye-bye.